The expansion draft will consist of 2 rounds, with Portland and Toronto having the ability to select from a designated pool of available players. The Fire and Tempo will snake picks, such that the team that holds the first pick in the first round via the coin toss will have the second pick in the second round, vice versa, right? In each round, they will alternate selections just like that, and we'll be able to pick one player listed on the unprotected list of the 13 existing teams.
But look at that frustration. Because what we're watching is someone realizing just how complicated this expansion draft is about to get. The WNBA just released the official rules for Portland and Toronto's expansion drafts. And they're not just complicated, they're designed to create chaos. 2 teams competing for the same pool of players, with most of the league's talent sitting in free agency. This isn't like Golden State's expansion draft last year. This is significantly worse.
But then you get to this part. And if a player who is not signed to a contract for the 2026 season is selected by Portland or Toronto, the selecting team will receive whatever rights to such player that the existing team would have had if that player was not selected in the expansion draft. Meaning they, whatever the situation was where they were, they're not under contract, going forward, that's the situation they inherit. Any player who has completed the playing services called for by her previous...
Here's the critical part everyone's missing. Each expansion team can only select one unrestricted free agent in the entire draft, just one. And if they pick that free agent, they become the only team allowed to offer that player a supermax contract. Think about what that means strategically. Portland and Toronto aren't just building rosters. They're gambling on which single free agent they can convince to anchor their franchise with the promise of maximum money. Miss on that pick and you've wasted your most valuable asset.
Player. So that is really important, right? That's really important because what does that mean? That means that Portland and Toronto are going to have to do a really diligent job identifying the unrestricted free agent they want to pick, right? Like the unrestricted free agent that they think can be a part of their core going forward that they can build around. And they also have an advantage there because they'll be the only team able to give that free agent a supermax because, they could draft free agent and then a free agent leave. Anyway, this is to incentivize that free agent to stay.
Now let's talk about what this means for established teams like Indiana. The Fever have some obvious protections. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston are locks because they're still on rookie contracts. Lexi Hall gets protected because she's a restricted free agent, and whoever drafts her would only inherit those restricted rights anyway. That's 3 spots accounted for immediately. The assumption is they protect Kelsey Mitchell as their 4th, especially if they plan to use the core designation to keep her under contract for another year. But that 5th protection spot, that's where it gets interesting, and that's where the real debate starts.
And Sophie Cunningham. And I say this as someone who's not all that high on Michaela Timpson. Like, she hasn't blown me away. She definitely has some talent, length, ability to block shots. Hopefully, she can polish her offensive game. But look, lost at times last year, a lot of the time. And I'm not like one of these folks that think, oh my goodness, there's no way you could ever let her go, right? Like, if you gave me the choice, who would I rather see on the Indiana Fever next year, Sophie Cunningham or Michaela Timpson? I'm taking Sophie Cunningham. But the issue is this. If you leave Timpson unprotected, she is almost surely going to be selected under these rules by one of those 2 teams. So almost surely gone out the door and a member of the Toronto Tempo or the Portland Fire.
The gut reaction is to protect Sophie Cunningham. She's a fan favorite, she fits the culture, and losing her would hurt. But here's the strategic reality that changes everything. If Indiana leaves Aaliyah Timpson unprotected, she's almost guaranteed to get selected by Portland or Toronto. She's a young player with length, shot-blocking ability, and upside. For an expansion team desperate for youth and potential, she's exactly the type of player you grab. So if the Fever don't protect Timpson, she's gone. That's a certainty. But Sophie Cunningham, the math is different. If Portland or Toronto want to use their one unrestricted free agent selection on her, they'd have to offer her a supermax to make it worth her while. Because otherwise, what's stopping Sophie from just walking back to Indiana in free agency? And here's the thing. If one of these expansion teams is willing to pay Sophie Cunningham supermax money, they could just do that in regular free agency anyway. These teams aren't going to be cap-strapped.
Meanwhile, with Sophie Cunningham, if one of those teams were to select her as their unrestricted free agent, that means they're offering her a supermax to keep her around, essentially, right? Because otherwise, what's to stop her from just going back to the Fever? If she really wants to be with the Fever, even if they draft her as the incentive to keep her, the reason to keep her would be that Supermax deal. And then if you're willing to do that, if you're one of those teams, and I could actually understand, like, look, Sophie is not a max player, but
So you're not really protecting Sophie by keeping her off the unprotected list. You're just hoping no expansion team is desperate enough to waste their one unrestricted free agent pick on a role player when they could target someone more impactful. And if they are that desperate, they're probably offering her more money than Indiana could responsibly match given their future cap situation, with Clark and Boston coming up for max extensions. The smart play? Protect Timpson. Let Sophie hit free agency naturally. If she wants to come back to Indiana, she will. If an expansion team wants to throw max money at her, that's a decision the Fever can't control anyway, whether they protect her or not.
Therefore, I think that's the 5. It will be CC, Boston, Hull, Timpson, and Mitchell. And the Kelsey situation still has to be determined as well. And with a free agent, your head gets spinning a little bit because you think about all the free agents and how the hell are the Tempo and the Fire going to fill out a roster under these circumstances. Hopefully they've got good international scouting departments.
And that's just one team's dilemma. Now multiply that complexity across all 13 existing franchises. Every team in the league is running these same calculations right now, trying to figure out which players to protect and which ones they're willing to risk losing. Veterans with 5+ years of experience have to be designated as potential unrestricted free agents, even if teams want to protect them. The paperwork alone is giving front offices headaches. Meanwhile, Portland and Toronto are sitting there trying to figure out their draft strategy with massive question marks everywhere. Who's actually going to be available? Which free agents are even interested in joining an expansion team? How do you build chemistry when you're selecting from 13 different team cultures? April 3rd. That's when this all goes down. Same day as the women's NCAA tournament semifinals, which means the basketball world is going to be absolutely chaotic. And here's what makes this particularly brutal for Portland and Toronto. They don't just need to nail the expansion draft. They also need to crush their international scouting, because the domestic talent pool is going to be picked clean. Golden State had the luxury of being the only expansion team, so they could be creative and strategic without worrying about competition. They found hidden gems, made smart trades, and built a respectable roster. But the Valkyries' success might have been a one-time thing, because the circumstances were completely different. Let's break down what Portland and Toronto are actually working with here. In the college draft, they're picking 6th and 7th in every round, alternating who gets which slot. So they're not getting premium rookie talent unless someone unexpected falls. That's fine for depth, but you're not building a franchise around the 6th pick. In the expansion draft, they snake picks. Whoever goes first in round 1 goes second in round 2. 2 rounds total, selecting from unprotected lists. And remember, most impact players are either protected or sitting in free agency with no obligation to sign with whoever drafts their rights. So you're essentially building a roster from the 6th or 7th best rookie in each draft round, 2 players selected from the leftovers of existing rosters, 1 unrestricted free agent you're betting everything on, and whatever international players you can convince to come over. That's not a recipe for immediate success. That's a recipe for a long rebuild. Think about the pressure on these front offices. You've got owners who just paid expansion fees expecting competitive basketball. You've got fans in Portland and Toronto who are excited about WNBA basketball finally coming to their cities. And you've got a roster construction process that's designed to protect existing teams rather than give expansion franchises a real fighting chance. The one unrestricted free agent rule is particularly brutal. You're essentially telling these teams, pick 1 star to build around, and if you guess wrong or if she doesn't want to sign with you despite the Supermax offer, you're stuck with a roster full of role players and projects. There's no margin for error. And here's what nobody's talking about: the competitive balance implications. The WNBA is expanding because the league is growing, ratings are up, and there's demand for more teams. But if Portland and Toronto spend their first 3 seasons getting blown out every night because the expansion rules didn't give them enough talent, that's not good for anyone. It hurts the league's credibility in those markets. It makes it harder to attract future expansion cities. And it creates a 2-tier league where half the teams are genuinely competitive and the other half are just hoping to avoid embarrassment. Golden State managed to avoid that fate, finishing with a respectable record and making some noise, but they had advantages these teams won't have. They were the only expansion team. They had an experienced front office, and they got a little lucky with how their picks developed. Portland and Toronto are walking into a much harder situation. So what's the solution? Honestly, there isn't a great one under these rules. Both teams need to absolutely nail their one unrestricted free agent selection. That's the player who determines whether you're competitive in year 2 or still rebuilding in year 4. They need their international scouting to uncover rotation players who can contribute immediately. And they need to hope that some veterans on existing rosters are left unprotected because their current teams undervalue them or have cap issues. The smart money says both Portland and Toronto are going to struggle initially. Not because their front offices are incompetent, but because the rules are designed to protect the existing team's competitive balance. The league learned from other sports expansion disasters and overcorrected, making it nearly impossible for new teams to be competitive quickly. But here's the interesting part. This might actually create some compelling storylines. Watching these teams try to build something from scratch, seeing which front office makes smarter decisions, following the journey of their one-star free agent signing trying to carry an expansion roster. There's drama in that struggle, even if the basketball isn't always pretty. April 3rd is going to be fascinating. Not because we're going to see 2 instant contenders emerge, but because we're going to see 2 franchises make their first major decisions with long-term implications. Who do they protect with that one unrestricted free agent pick? Which unprotected players do they target? How do they balance immediate competitiveness with long-term development? And for existing teams like Indiana, the calculus is just as interesting. Do you protect the player you like more, or the player you're more likely to lose? Do you gamble that expansion teams won't waste picks on certain positions? Do you try to make side deals to influence who gets selected? The next few months are going to reveal a lot about which franchises have the best front offices, the best scouting, and the best strategic thinking. Because under these expansion rules, there's no room for mistakes. Every decision matters, and the consequences last for years. So yeah, Portland and Toronto are in a tough spot. But they knew what they were signing up for when they paid those expansion fees. Now we get to see if they can build something sustainable despite the rules working against them. My prediction, one of these teams figures it out and becomes competitive by year 3. The other one struggles for 5 years before finally getting it right. The difference will come down to that one unrestricted free agent pick, and whether they can convince her that building something from scratch is worth the supermax money. Gandia do gi that one on shuns